Antelope Freeway 1 mile. Antelope Freeway 1/2 mile. Antelope Freeway 1/4 mile. Antelope Freeway 1/8 mile. Antelope Freeway 1/16 mile. Antelope Freeway 1/32 mile. Antelope Freeway 1/64 mile. Antelope Freeway 1/128 mile. Antelope Freeway 1/256 mile. Antelope Freeway 1/512 mile. We've just passed Antelope Freeway.
This is Dale Matthews. I run a free, non-commercial website called BadCounty.com, where we keep track of what's happening with the Josephine County Board of Commissioners.
For example, this week we're going to talk about fees. Those extra little taxes that the county commissioners put on your bill. Now, they're not supposed to work like extra little taxes. What they're supposed to be is a fee for a service. And by state law, this fee cannot just go up because the commissioners say it's going to go up. It needs to be tied in with an actual service that they provide. And the idea of the fee is to pay for that service, not as a revenue enhancer. Well, it often hasn't worked that way. So several years ago, it was getting pretty bad, and the citizens decided to put a referendum on the ballot. It takes a lot of effort to get something on the ballot. You have to get so many signatures. It's a long, drawn-out process that can be very expensive, but the citizens were able to do that pretty quickly, and they got an item onto the ballot, and it passed. And this said, you cannot, as county commissioners, raise any fees, because of the way they had been abusing it, unless you come to the citizens for a vote. Now, the way it's supposed to work today is when they want to establish a brand new fee or substantially raise an older fee, they have to have a public hearing. Well, this was going to go beyond that. It says, because of the way you've been doing this, you're not really listening to us in these public hearings. Now you can't raise fees unless there's a vote, which means that there's going to be probably 3, 4, 6 months at the quickest between votes. Maybe only once a year. Well, what if we really need to... What's the emergency? Really? An emergency fee? Well, after this passed, overwhelming margin, an elected official, Steve Rich, he's the only county legal counsel who was elected in the entire state. And that happened because of the abuses of a previous county legal counsel. You can see where this is going. We see abuses, and then we try to do something about it. Now, remember, this fellow is elected by you. He's supposed to represent you. And what he did is he was so upset, the county commissioners were so upset with this new vote, that they'd have to always check everything with the citizens. He went to court, representing them against you, and won that court case, and that's it. Vote nullified. All that effort that the citizens put into it were nullified by the fellow that was supposed to represent you. Now, he has been in office for 19 years. By the end of 2014, that'll be 20 years. No one has ever run against him in 2 decades. The very first person to do so won in the primary. So we're going to be replacing this guy with another person who I hope is better. That's Wally Hicks. I hope he's better. It's interesting, I think, again, that he's never faced opposition, and the first time that he did, boom, he's out of there right in the primary. The way that works is when there's only 2 people running, whoever wins the primary election doesn't have to go to the general election, because you're not talking about 8 people running for the same seat. We could never get anybody to run against this guy. Finally did. So this problem with fees continues. If you ever noticed on your telephone bill, there's all kinds of fees, and I defy you to try to figure out what some of these things mean. The city of Grants Pass has something on the water bill called transportation fee. Transportation fee on your water bill? What? Transporting the water from one place to another? Why is this on a water bill? I asked one of the Grants Pass city councilors about this, and they said, No, that's not what it means. It doesn't mean transporting the water. Does it mean have something to do with the trucks that transport the pipes in order to... No. What could it mean? Transportation fee on your water bill. Does it mean that when they're digging up the streets, it has something to do with repairing the streets? Oh, yes, okay. So if you're going to lay in pipes, you need to sometimes dig up the streets, of course, and no. Well, what does it mean? It has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with water. What? No, it's something else entirely. Well, wait a minute. It's on the water bill, but it has nothing to do with water? No. Grants Pass City Council has decided to add not a jail levy, because that didn't pass. They're going to add on a jail fee to your water bill. What? Yes, a jail fee on your water bill. No, wait a minute. Why would there be a jail fee and a transportation fee, whatever that means, on my water bill? The actual answer to this is, you have to have water. I mean, you're going to need to have water just to flush your toilet. And so, they've got you. You have to pay it. And if you don't pay it, they'll cut you off. This is the one and only reason they put some kind of unexplainable fee, out of context fee, on your water bill, because if you don't pay it, they'll cut you off. It's their way of forcing you to pay that fee. Really? And how did the Grants Pass City Council, I'll get back to the county in a second, how did the Grants Pass City Council come to the idea that they were going to put a jail fee on any of your bills? Because that levy, that taxing district, did not pass. And they were upset that it didn't pass. So they said, well, it should have passed. However, it didn't. That was the 7th time that they brought this to us, and it didn't pass. So they say, well, okay, then we'll take our own little vote, and we'll charge it to you anyway. What? Wait a minute. This was their way of getting around the free and fair process of taking a vote. Why bother with a vote when you can just put it on your water bill? For Grants Pass City residents, this is where you live. Just a little side note. The Republican Party of Josephine County recently took a vote among all of their Central Committee members. It was a pretty controversial vote. It doesn't really matter what it's about. It was about the recall, but it doesn't really matter what the vote was. It was the fact that they sat down together, all of them sat down together, and they took a vote. To me, that's the American process, and the vote, if you lose it, sorry. If you win, good for you, but it's a vote. It's the American way. Now, just before this vote was taken, 2 of the prominent members of the Republican Central Committee, and see, here's the problem for a lot of people. I name names. I tell you who's involved with this. So one of the people was Roy Lindsay, and the other person was Harry Mackin. And they went to the head of the Republican Party, Keith Traherne, and said, if this passes, then we're going to do everything that we can to go to the money supporters for the Josephine County Republican Party and get them to withdraw all support for the Republican Party headquarters. Now, wait a minute. That doesn't sound very fair or very American to me. What, if we lose this vote, then we're going to punish you? And sure enough, by a very slim margin, they lost the vote. Now, remember, this was a vote of everybody. Yes, they just barely lost it, but they did lose it. And instead of sitting there and saying, well, I'm not very happy with the way that works, but that is the way we do business in America, well, apparently not. because as soon as the vote was over, next day, Keith Traherne, head of the Republican Party, said nullified the vote. Nullified the vote? No, how do you do that? Well, we're just not going to do that. Wait a minute. You lost the vote. Yeah, well, there's reasons for this. Yeah, we know what the reasons are. We know now, because that's one of the things BadCounty does, is we go out and we find out why things are happening, and then we share that with you. So what do you think about that? No matter who it is, it's not just because it's the Republican Central Committee. It could be anybody, but when you take a vote, I think it should mean something, and then not have some old boys network decide, we're going to subvert the process and do it some other way. What country did you grow up in? So here's the main part of this story. Diane Hoover is head of the county health department. During the budget process, this last budget process for the county, she put in a request to raise some fees and to lower a couple of fees. Lower a couple of fees. All right. And the chief financial officer was rather concerned about this. Not concerned because some of the fees were going to go up by more than 40%. Here's what Simon Hare said. I just don't understand how we did it. We just did an assessment of public health fees in 2011. So how could it be, because that was fairly current, Diane Hoover's done a lot of cost-saving types of measures, and yet we still have an increase of 40%? He was the only one that asked a question about it. Rosemary Padgett, the chief financial officer, said, well, that's why I thought Diane was going to be here today, so we could discuss some of these things. Now, this shows a little surprise, there's the reason I'm telling you this, on the part of Simon Hare, and a little questioning, that's the reason I'm telling you this, by the chief financial officer, Rosemary Padgett. So Simon Hare and Keith Heck say something like, well, maybe we can convey a message to her or ask her a question. And Cheryl Walker, the chair right now, says, well, which of these do you have questions about, Rosemary? Not the 40%. She didn't. She said, I question when we've got a department and programs that are not paying their bills, being able to reduce their costs of service. See, here was the problem. It didn't bother anybody that some of the fees were going up by 40%, but there was a couple of fees that were going to go down slightly, and she was questioning that. Now, the commissioners were so concerned that 2 days later, they wanted Diane Hoover in there to talk to them. And she says, well, I'm going to explain why these fees need to go down. She says, now, I had never really sat down and calculated whether these fees are proper. See, remember, in order for a fee to be proper by state law, it has to be tied to reality. The commissioners hate that. Tied to reality. Fees have to be tied to reality. Well, we need money. Remember when I mentioned to you that Rosemary Padgett said, I don't understand why some fees are going down because this department is losing money. Fees have to be tied to something that they've actually done. And you can't charge fees to someone for things that you haven't performed for them. So if they're going to undercharge for pregnancy testing, and you can't possibly get pregnant, I can't, then I shouldn't be charged, I should not be charged, a fee for my own pregnancy testing. This is causing a problem for the county government, because how can they pay for this if they can't charge you a fee? And it's got to be a fair fee. Okay, and that's also part of our county charter. It has to be fair. So she comes to them and she says, well, I've looked more carefully into some of these fees that we charge. And she uses a whole category of fees. And she says, well, when we're doing inspections of something like a restaurant, it takes approximately 1 hour to do that kind of inspection. But according to the fee that we're charging people for 3 hours at that fee rate. Now, wait a minute. Why would you charge them for 3 hours? Well, in no explanation. So she said, we really do need to drop that fee because they're charging people 300% too much. The chief financial officer was not very happy about this, and the county commissioners were surprised that this was necessary. But she said, look, we have to follow Oregon state law, and we have to charge people for the service that we've offered. So now the ball is with the commissioners. These fees were suggested in the past and also approved by the chief financial officer, Rosemary Padgett, and it turns out that they were 300% too high. So the county commissioners can say, well, wait a minute, we didn't start these fees, but some of these fees have been assessed under the administration of the current county commissioners. So they bear some responsibility. That's one of the reasons they're hearing what the health officer says about reducing them. They don't say, well, we're not going to listen to you because we didn't establish them. They have to listen to her now, and she's bringing it forward to them. She wasn't the health officer when they were started, but they're new and she's new. Only the chief financial officer was around when these were established, and now they're going to do something about it. It has to be a formula that's defensible. Now, do they mean defensible from you listening to this show? No. Do they care what you think? No, they mean defensible as far as the state is concerned and living up to their promises to follow the state constitution and our local charter. They have to use a formula for their fees that's defensible, and the reason they have to is the fee, once again, has to be reflecting reality and not just some 300% extra because they want to charge that. And then Simon Harris said something in the little back room which I think is telling. He said, as opposed to something that historically, and then he dropped his voice very low, might have been a little bit more, does $200 feel better than $120? Really? What he's saying there is, maybe some of these fees have been established at $200 instead of $120 because it just feels right. So at the next county weekly business session, I got up and said, it's proven that the county overcharged us. So when will you return the money? Now, it's not a lot of money, but it is the principle of the thing. You're not supposed to do that. And it happened on your watch. So really, you do need to do something about it. I think that the overcharges should be returned to those. I'm not going to get a dime out of it, but I think they should be returned to the people to whom it was overcharged. At the very least, it should be returned back to the companies that were overcharged during the administration of these current commissioners, because they found out that the county had been charging people too much, and they were going to make good on it. And because it's such a small amount, it should be easier to do. We're not talking about hundreds of thousands of dollars here. It's proven that the county overcharged us. So when will you return the money? Diane Hoover, the health director, met with you last week and pointed out that when she was trying to ascertain that the fees that are charged by the health department are fair and legally defensible, that she could not for some of the fees. And, much to the surprise of some people in county government, she suggested lowering some of the fees. For example, if it only takes 1 hour to do an inspection, why would citizens be charged for 3 hours? Does the county have any kind of policy about returning monies that were overcharged? Here's what Cheryl Walker replied. Those are things that are, at this point, historical. And we can't go back, retro, and try to second-guess all of those people, because all these knew, just as they will this time, to go to public hearings. And people have an opportunity then to make public comment. See, the problem with that is they didn't know. How are we supposed to know? We don't know that they're overcharging by 300%. They tell us, here's what we're charging, and we take their word for it. Well, that may be a mistake, but that's what we do. And so when people come to a public hearing, which is required, and they hear about these things, they say, well, I guess we need inspections, restaurant inspections, whatever kind of health inspections. I guess we need them. So you're telling us this is what it costs? Oh, yes, that's what it costs. Now, what are we supposed to do? We can't call everybody a liar. I mean, we have to assume that they're telling us the truth. Turns out they weren't. Well, you had your chance. No, we didn't really have a chance because we weren't given the information. That's what we do at our website. We give you the information for free. These jokers are hiding it from you, or they don't know. Somebody knew that it didn't take 3 hours to do an inspection, yet they wanted to charge 3 hours. I know it takes I'm not really sure how long it takes. What? No, it takes an hour, but we're going to charge for 3. For what reason? Well, we can't second guess them. Sure we can. Well, that's historical. No, it's not. You're still doing it. She followed up by saying, and they're available for you to review and to make comment. And if you can't be here, if you're out there and you can't be here, you can make written comment on those. And she turns to Simon Hare and says, do you know the date of these hearings? Well, it doesn't matter if the date is every day. If you don't know where the errors are, then how are you going to make any kind of comment? The commissioners used to do this at their weekly business session. They used to put all comments by citizens way up front. This is the first item, and if you have any comments about what we're saying or doing today, here's your chance. Very first thing after the flag salute, you can get up and comment. Now, how are we supposed to comment about what you're saying and doing today if we're the first ones to speak? To the Republic for which it stands, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, my comment is, later on today, when you say, we don't know what they're going to say, now how are we supposed to comment? Why, you have equal and fair opportunity. No, wait a minute. We don't know what the content will be. Well, this is much more efficient. Efficiency is the enemy of democracy. So I got up at the next meeting because they hadn't answered my questions. It's historical. We're not going to second guess. I said, you didn't establish this fee, but it happened under your watch. And so now that you know, now that you've been informed, you've been overcharging people, what is this Board of Commissioners going to do? When are you going to return that money? Not to me, but to the businesses or to the citizens of Josephine County that have been overcharged. What actions are you going to take? So what I did is I contacted Diane Hoover yesterday morning, and I said, repeated some of this, she knew it, and I said, now Cheryl Walker says it's historical. So my question to you is, before you lower these fees, and thank you for doing so, isn't it happening now? So that's not history. That might be today. And I said to her, could you please tell me, ma'am? And I praised her 4 times in this conversation. I said, please, could you tell me, when was the last time that someone, business, people in Josephine County, were charged these high fees? The last time it happened. Is it really historical, or is it happening today? Her answer was, because of the kinds of questions you ask, I pity you. This conversation set an end. Keith Heck is smiling. I imagine he would. So you'll certainly, after this, especially Cheryl Walker, will talk about all of the reasons that Diane Hoover should be praised, and she's the best health director in the world. And as our previous administration, under Chairman Dwight Ellis says, our CFO is the best in the world. Some chief financial officer in China is crying her eyes out tonight because she was told that she is the very best CFO in the world. And actually that person is in Grants Pass, Oregon. Best in the world. But the question still remains, what are you going to do as county commissioners when these overcharges happened on your watch and you have the ability to do something about it, like return the overcharges? It's simple. I predict that you will do nothing. Now, this is your county. Here's how your elected commissioner, Keith Heck, answered. Mr. Matthews has the do, vol, whatever the motivation is, I don't know. I try not to read motives. But the continual complimenting by insult of certain workers and county workers, and certainly Diane Hoover, who is the county health director, is made reference to this morning. And somehow alluding, as you quote, sir, I don't know why these fees went down, indicating that she was some sort of dunce as to why these fees went down, or outside of her purview of responsibility or knowledge, is something that's just, it's ludicrous. But most of your remarks are. At the end, you say that I pity you, and then you made some comments about my smile. This smile needs to be a smile of agreement, is that I, as well, have a sense of pity, that your life is summed up in just such negativity toward the, whatever the county workers are, efforts that are trying to be made, doesn't mean that everything is correct or even accurate on what people try to do. But they can be supported, and changes can be made, an attempt to be made. But to think that sum total of my life would be sitting in your shoes at this time of life it's a sad remark. And the only reason I mention this is because you mentioned my name, and I'll mention yours. I pity you as well. Okay, so you can always count on Keith Heck for comic relief. Where do you start? First of all, when problems are brought to the county commissioners, sometimes they do involve decisions that are a little bit questionable. And most of the time, Keith Heck will kind of laugh to himself, sometimes burst out laughing, sometimes just smile, and it's a mystery to me why he finds some of these things that they're doing wrong to be so amusing. Perhaps he's thinking, oh, this is Dale Matthews, why no one's going to believe this guy. Okay, instead they're going to believe Keith Heck, I suppose. And then he says something about how I thought that somebody was a dunce. I didn't think anyone was a dunce. What I said was the chief financial officer and at least one of the commissioners had questions about why the health director wanted to lower some fees. They had questions because they didn't know the answer. And remember, way back when we started, sorry this is taking so long, but that the chief financial officer said, well, I don't know why she's lowering fees. It doesn't seem like a good idea to me, and she's not at this meeting. We'll invite her. And she came back in 2 days. So nobody was a dunce. They just didn't know why she was suggesting this. So I wasn't criticizing people and calling them dunces. He said, that's just ludicrous, as most of your remarks are. You know, that's just a little bit insulting, you think? Then when I reached the health director and asked her if these fees were being charged today, I was trying to get to the idea of, are these really historical, like historical that happened decades ago, or is this still happening today? I would assume it was a simple question that they're probably happening today, and Diane Hoover, as a good public servant, was trying to turn that off and say, hey, fellas, let's not charge 3 times too much. That would seem like a reasonable thing. But I got an unreasonable answer from the health director, who said, because of the kinds of questions you ask, I pity you. This conversation is at an end. I don't think that's the right way for a public servant to treat a question that I think any reasonable person might ask. Are you still charging these fees? Thank you for lowering them. But are they happening today? I was trying to get at whether or not they were historical, whatever that means, in the deep, dark history of Josephine County, or is it happening now? That's not historical. Cheryl Walker gets her chance to answer. To say that we were surprised, and then she kind of rolled her head. To say that we were surprised last week about fees from the health department is totally inaccurate. And I'm going to, just a second here. They were surprised. Simon Hare was surprised. Even the chief financial officer was surprised. They did not know. They didn't know the reason why. I think that fits the definition of surprise. So she says again, to say that we were surprised last week about fees from the health department is totally inaccurate. I have met with the director, Diane Hoover. We've been corresponding by email, not only with me, but with the finance office. And she also contacted the state health department in regards to how to calculate, because the state environmental health division actually mandates how these things will be determined. It's an OAR 333-012-053, and it says, must shift certain costs of the public health director to these fees. You know, it never stops, because in this public meeting, Cheryl Walker quotes OAR 333-012-053, and she says, she's reading from a piece of paper, and she says, quote, must shift certain costs of the public health director to these fees. Here's the problem. That's not what it says. In fact, nothing even remotely similar to that statement exists in the Oregon Administrative Rules. Now, we weren't looking in the wrong place. That section was called Licensing and Fees, and it is 333-012-053. That's not what it says. You can go and see the procedural rules for yourself, but here's the big point. I actually went to Google, and I Googled must shift certain costs. I Googled public health director to these fees. I couldn't find two words side by side, except maybe for health director, that matched what she was saying anywhere in the universe. So, what kind of piece of paper was she reading from? Why would Commissioner Cheryl Walker sit in a public meeting, tell us slowly, you know how she does this, recite this thing slowly like a school teacher, tell us exactly where to look? Did she think that we wouldn't go check it out for ourselves? I don't think the comment made a lot of sense to begin with. Must shift certain costs to these fees. I don't know what that means. But she was reading it wrong. And it wasn't a paraphrase of a large... It didn't say anything like that. I think it's a seminal moment. It's an important point, because when you have a public official that's going to read to you from a piece of paper and tell it to you wrong, where it's not even close. Mice wear overshoes. No, they don't, but that's not what it says. But that's what she's telling you that it says. How can you trust her, especially when she's reading from a piece of paper and pronouncing it very slowly and carefully? And here's where to go look. Well, we did. Did she think no one would ever look? That tells you who Cheryl Walker is. So she continues. So she calculated all those fees, sent those to the state for their review to make sure they were in compliance with the state rules and statutes, and they approved it, with one exception. She had she put in $25 for one of those fees, and $35, and the state said it cannot exceed $25, so she reduced that one. And however, to say that she claimed we had been overcharging people, and then there's a long pause. We will have hearings. People can come and comment. And those fees were set and voted upon after those opportunities. And now we have a situation where we have a formula that she is complying with to calculate those fees, and has put these fees out there for consideration. We will be having a hearing on all of our fees coming up. I don't remember the date on that. I think it's in a week or so. But the absurd comment about returning money to the people. What Mr. Matthews is he's talking about less than $300 of the fees that were reduced, all of those fees in the health department, less than $300. Well, to me, the question is, how many companies were charged $288, not $300? And how long has this been going on? When was the last date this fee was assessed? Those are some of the questions this administration refuses to answer. Back to Cheryl Walker. If you can find economies in the way that it's done or how it's repeated, we are required to reduce those fees. You know, this is not about a sudden revelation in economies of scale. It's about revealing blatant overcharging, 3 times too much. It's not about economies of scale. Cheryl Walker. It doesn't mean we overcharged anybody in the past. So all the time that Mr. Matthews is putting in probably doesn't work out to be very cost effective for the time he's taking up of our department heads having to talk about it. So you can see they're not going to be returning any money, even though it happened under their watch, and they could so easily. It's a small amount of money. It's the principle of the thing. Cheryl Walker sums up by saying, so you're welcome to come and make comments on these fees, and I think it's only appropriate, here it comes, that we have a very dedicated and diligent and professional department head as Diane Hoover. Remember how I predicted that they were going to end up by praising her as the best in the world? Who is trying to do her very best job for the people of Josephine County. They never stop patting each other on the back, because much of her programs are mandated by the state in regards to inspections and services provided. She's doing, I think, an outstanding job of doing it. That's all I have to say, Mr. Chair. In doing this outstanding job, she said, because of the kinds of questions you ask, I pity you.
We've just passed Antelope Freeway.